Today is the premiere of the Explorer Talks. We're going to learn more about tech, and today it's Connected Life theme.
Now that the Internet of Things is maturing into something that a lot of people can build their own systems on, you can hack it and you can develop it. And what we are now living in is indeed...
I believe that we should not just talk about connected homes and connected cars, we should really talk about connecting ourselves.
What is a chip implant? Because maybe you think of like a SIM card or something. The chip implant, it's not this big.
You can start with a fitness wearable, logging your health and your steps and your activity. But the most interesting dimension is if you can put technology inside yourself.
Welcome to the premiere of the first ever 3 Explorer Talks. Yeah. My name is Åsa, and I'm part of the team that works with innovation and growth here at 3. And we will also be hosting these 3 Explorer Talks. And we will have occasion once a month at lunchtime on a Friday. The aim of this is to stimulate our curiosity, but also learn more about tech and how it affects us. So today's theme is the connected life, and in more specific, the connected body. We will hear more from our speaker during about 20 minutes. But after this talk, a few volunteers, we have 10 people, employees from 3 that are going to implant a chip under their skin. So we're going to do the implementation over here at that table, so do not miss that. But first, please welcome our very popular and well-awarded speaker, Sjöblad.
Thank you very much, guys. You are too kind. Thank you for taking time off your lunch breaks to come and hear a little inspirational talk about possible future applications of emerging technologies. I hope that this will be a recurring thing for you, as Åsa said, that you can come here every Friday once a month and learn about new fascinating tech concepts. I'll tell you very briefly about myself. I spend my days working at a place called Epicenter, which is an innovation hub in Stockholm. We share a space, more than 200 different companies share the same space, all the way from startups to some of Sweden's largest corporates that run innovation labs at Epicenter. And my job at Epicenter is to be the Chief Disruption Officer. I don't know if you have one at 3, but maybe you want to look into it at some point. So I'll briefly tell you also what being a Chief Disruption Officer is all about. It's not about causing disruption. There's enough people doing that. But being a Chief Disruption Officer is about helping our member companies at Epicenter to understand technology trends. We've all heard of technological disruption happening to different markets and to different companies. But what I want to help with is that if you think of these emerging technologies as a big tsunami wave, you don't want to be a little ship that is hit by the wave and you sink. You want to be the surfer that sees the wave in time, position yourself in the right way, and then you can just ride that wave to massive success without any particular effort. I mean, that's what you want to be, and that's where you want to time these tech curves and understand them. So that's what I try to do as disruption officer. I try to help people see disruption before it actually hits them. So I also have a side gig. I work as part of the faculty at an education institution called Singularity University. And I have to admit, I also am part of the biohacking network BioNyfiken, which is a community for biohackers here in Stockholm. We run events and hackathons and workshops of all different kinds, which are all about exploring new applications of technology and hacking, not just computer hardware and software, but also hacking wetware, hacking biological systems. And as we like to say in biohacking circles, biology is the new IT. And hopefully, in the schools, our kids will not study just programming of computers and that kind of devices, but certainly programming of cells, of plants, of animals, and perhaps even of humans. That is the times we live in. So let me just take a starting point in the term digitalization. I'm sure you've heard this term so many times that you instinctively zone out from the presentation. But I just want to touch this as a starting point because I want to ask the question, what is digitalization ultimately about? And at Singularity University, we like to speak of the 4 Ds of emerging technologies. And super briefly, it's the insight that when a technology goes digital, what it ultimately means is that this technology dematerializes. We go from physical photos, physical CDs, physical papers, to digital emails, digital images, and digital files. We take them from being material to being immaterial. And the interesting implication of when a technology is dematerialized is that the price of making one more copy is pretty much zero. So what happens is that we demonetize the technology. The price or the cost to make one more copy is zero. And the fascinating effect with that is, of course, that when something becomes so cheap that it costs nothing, technology democratizes and it becomes available to anyone. And this is a fascinating global trend that we see today. Going from a generation ago, only the richest people in the world would have a mobile phone. And today, people who live, like this gentleman who lives in the slum in India, has a phone that is 1 million times better than what was available to the richest just a generation ago. If you describe it from a sort of consumer perspective, we see that technology is getting at the same time smaller, cheaper, and more powerful. We take the example of music players. 2 generations ago, they were as big as a piece of furniture. In the 1980s, we got the portable music player, the iconic Sony Walkman. And now the music player that at least I use, it is just this little listening device. It's an earable, not a wearable, that I have in my ear that can store 4 gigabytes. It can store thousands of songs, and I can use it not just when jogging, but also when going swimming. And that is what we're seeing happening in technology after technology. It's not just about music players. This happens to cameras, to computers, and all kinds of different sensors. I know I'm going to swear in the church here, because I know that a lot of things that you do and probably work with is related to the IoT and the Internet of Things. But let me tell you, I am sick of talking about the Internet of Things. And let me explain why. I think that the Internet of Things is a term that has been around for since at least the late 1990s. And what it is, it's a very technical term. It's a term used by engineers, and it's about connectivity bandwidth, and it's about setting up systems. But ultimately, we want to understand what is the value-creating dimension of connecting everything. And the term that I prefer using is the sensor economy. And let me explain why. So, ultimately, what is the point of connecting all these things? Well, it's because we can put sensors in them so that we can collect data and we can interact with them. And why do we call it not just the Internet of Things, but instead the economy? Yes, it's because we see all these connected systems as the enablers for transactions, for moving of money, information, and solutions. And this is a much more useful term now that the Internet of Things is maturing into something that a lot of people can build their own systems on. You can hack it and you can develop it. And what we are now living in is indeed what I like to call the trillion sensor economy, when everything is connected and we can interact with it. What the sensor economy means is that the interfaces we have with technology are changing. We're already seeing that, I mean, we know the traditional way of interacting with computers and phones is that we use our fingers, right? We type on a keyboard, or we use our thumbs to scroll or to type messages. But we are in the middle of a shift, which is all about new interfaces. We can use gestures to play computer games or to switch channels on TV. We can have voice interaction. We can speak to smart devices in our homes, and we can interact with them in ways that involve no touch, and we can multitask. And we can, for example, drive a car, and it will be able to talk to it while we're busy with doing many other things. So this is all solutions that are enabled by the sensor economy. I'm particularly fond, as a biohacker and understanding biological systems, of connecting bodies. I would love to ask you guys, you work in a high-tech telco company. How many of you guys in this room use a fitness wearable or have been using one earlier? Can I see a show of hands? Good. I would say it's not really half, but I think it's positive. Can I please ask the rest of you, give it a try. Because let me tell you why. If you wear, I mean, this is, for example, a Fitbit, but there are many others in the market. If you begin wearing one, you will gain very useful insights about yourself as a starting point. For example, for me, I know that I sleep too little. And you can walk around and have that feeling, oh yeah, I'm tired, I haven't slept enough lately. But with this device, I can have a perfect log of how much I have slept over the last week, over the last month. And the difference is, instead of intuitive decision making, you can apply data-driven decision making. And you can also do tests. Okay, I can see a pattern here. The nights I go out and have a few beers, that has a significant effect on my deep sleep. And that is very personal, and you can't really begin to understand that until you get the data. But getting a fitness wearable, guys, is not just about your personal health. That is sort of a side win. Putting on a fitness wearable is about understanding the power of wearable technology, and especially mapping of human behaviors. And if you work with digital transformation or digital innovation in any kind of form, I think it's a professional mistake not to understand the power of health logging wearables. Because there are marvelous things you can understand. A good friend of mine, just to give you an example, who wears one of these wristbands, he took the data set, mapping and following his stress, and checked it with his credit card spending habits. And he found a very interesting pattern. He learned that he was a high spender when he was very stressed. Then he was taking taxi, and he was buying services because he couldn't solve problems himself. And he was also a high spender in situations when he was very relaxed, when he was on holiday, when he was with friends. And what was interesting was that this pattern repeated itself not just on a daily basis, also on the weekly basis, in terms of Monday being travel and Friday being leisure day, as well as over a year. And this is just one illustration of the systematic behavioral insights you can gain from looking into human behavior by smart health logging wearables. So that's my advice to you. If there's one takeaway from today, try it out, right? They're not even 1,000 krona. You can always give it to a friend. But I'm sure you will learn some interesting things, and especially if you think creatively about this technology. What if I can hack it? What if we can combine it with some other system that we have, and we can gain some new insights? I also like to talk about the concept that we are not just connecting our bodies with fitness wearables, but there are so many now wearable systems that are part of the sensor economy that we should not just speak about the connected home and the connected car, but we can truly speak of connected bodies. And there's a range of applications, because this is affecting a lot of different fields. Not just the fitness wearables, but the augmented reality headsets that perhaps many of us will be wearing, or it will be integrated in our eyeglasses in a few years from now. In the medical technology field, we are presently at the time that we are making brain implants into hundreds of thousands of people to treat, for example, Parkinson's or depression. We have a very smart patch developed recently by the medtech company Abbott that checks your blood sugar. Instead of taking a blood sample every time you need to check, you just wear this patch for a few weeks and you swipe it with your smartphone to get a reading. And this is interesting because this is an enabler not just for people who happen to suffer from diabetes, but I think this is a very interesting application for anyone to try. So if you get your hands on one of these devices and try it for a couple of weeks, take it. Because let me tell you, it's a fascinating insight to see what happens to your blood sugar when you can measure it repeatedly, and you can see what happens after different meals and when you take different foodstuffs. So drinking a Coca-Cola has a very interesting effect on your blood sugar that you up to now just intuitively have felt, but suddenly can be made visible in data. We can swallow pills, but I also want to share one of my recent favorite examples, which is the next generation phones, perhaps. And that is a little device that you just put in your mouth, and it's like a little, looks like a big bean, and you can have it inside your mouth like a Bluetooth piece if you are working in a space, for example, where you can't have electronics on the outside. And it works with bone conduction, so the sound is excellent for transmitting to you, and you can also sub-vocalize your own speech and transmit signals this way. I'm going to talk a little bit more about implants, but I want to make this insight to all of you guys, and that is that I do see the human mouth as the most awesome place to place sensors. The good thing is that the mouth is already open if you want to put stuff inside, and there are a lot of people who work professionally with putting artificial objects in people's mouths. Dentists, we've all met them, right? But you know what they do? They put stupid implants in people's mouths, right? We use them for chewing as if we were cows. Now imagine the fantastic sensors you could stick in a teeth implant, and you could log pH level in the mouth, blood sugar levels, you could check snoring, chewing, speech. There is fantastic amounts of data we could harvest from a dental implant. But that is a scenario for the future. So let me come back to the essence of today's little talk, which is chip implants. And I want to start with this point that still what we can't get around, even though technology around us is getting smarter, that we need to identify ourselves in all different contexts. And we still use a lot of strange, old school, legacy devices and systems to access. We even use keys made of metal, a technology that hasn't changed since the Roman Empire. In the ruins of Pompeii, they have found metal keys that look very similar to the ones we use today. And probably you, just like me, your wallets are full with different travel cards, club cards, payment cards, access cards, library cards, gym cards, and other identification tokens that you have to carry with you, a whole portfolio of them. Now, what I managed to do, since I got my first chip implant now almost 4 years ago, is that I have managed to replace a whole range of these devices. I have managed to dematerialize what used to be junk that I carried around in my pockets. So going from the upper side here down, let me just give you a few examples. This, for example, is membership in different shopping clubs around Sweden. So if I go to Trelleborg, I can get discount in stores all around Trelleborg by swiping my chip when I pay for something. I can replace keys and badges to padlocks and cupboards. I can have my business cards now input in my hand, so I never run out of these paper cards. You can swipe me and you can get my contacts from my chip into your phone. I can store data like on a USB on my chip implant. I don't have, when I go to the gym, I don't need to bring that plastic card anymore. I just touch my hand at the turnstiles and then I enter. This is the PIN code. I don't need to remember the PIN code to unlock my phone anymore. I can just tap my hand and then it's automatically unlocked, which is also a matter of convenience. Perhaps what I use most is I have replaced the door badge to get into Epicenter. So many times a day we go in and out of the building or all the different conference room because it's a shared office space we use to access with our badges, the printers, the alarm, and even the vending machines. There we all use our implants to buy candy in the vending machines and to access the different rooms. And it's a very smooth interface. Always when I get there in the morning, there is someone standing looking in their pockets for their keys or digging in the handbag, and I can just be a gentleman and say, "Can I help you in?" And there you go. So for me, it is a fun way to look into how can I dematerialize and maybe have one less thing to worry about when I go out of my home in the morning. So to give you a little explanation, what is a chip implant? Because maybe you think of like a SIM card or something. The chip implant, it's not this big. It's It's a 2 by 12 millimeters, and it's a glass capsule that has a couple of components. It has a copper antenna, so it doesn't have a battery. So the way it works is that the copper antenna picks up a magnetic field, for example, from a smartphone or from a door reader, and then it wakes up the implant because of magnetic induction creates a little electrical current waking up the chip, and the chip can say, hello world, here is my information, or for example, this is the ID that gives you access to this door. And the implant is coated in a special ceramic glass which is biocompatible. And this means that the body just ignores it. It doesn't attack it. It can sit there for a very long time. And how do we know it's safe? Well, let me tell you. It's because we put this in billions and billions of animals. Since the early 1990s, chip implanting cats, dogs, and horses is just a matter of procedure. And so we know very well what happens to these implants when they're placed inside the human body. I've also been told if you give talks and you have cute pictures of cats, people like it, so check. Specific user cases then for implants. Opening doors, like in this instance here at Epicenter. Now, there are a couple of different door systems, and some places, possibly your office, because I tried the chip when I went through the turnstiles here, may have higher level of security, and then a standard chip may not be able to give you that access. But there are different places. People use them at university and to the tvättstuga of the house where they live in and similar places. You can also use this to personalize access to devices. We, for example, modified a soft air gun. We put an NFC reader in the handgun so that you could control the safety mechanism with the implant. And for me, this is a very interesting user case. Because we can increase gun safety. We've all read terrible stories of some child finding a gun in a home and perhaps harming a family member. And here we can truly personalize these technologies. But it doesn't have to be handguns. If you want to play with technology, you can also do it to the electrical toothbrush in your home. And you can, no one else in the family can use it except if they have the implant. We also did a little workshop with SJ last year, Swedish National Railways, Statens Järnvägar. And a few guys at SJ got chip implanted, and then they thought, hey, wait a minute, what if we use this for tickets? And the way it works is really simple, because all the conductors that check tickets on the trains around Sweden, they have Samsung phones. And when they want to read your tickets, they typically take the camera and look at the QR code that you hold up on your phone. But it works just as well with the chip implant these days. So last summer we had a premiere trip, and we all held up our implants, and the conductor would just tap the implant, and then it would turn up Hannes Sjöblad, you sit in seat 4 in train car number 1. And that was a pretty cool experience. And this is what I'm fascinated about, because it just took these guys 5 weeks from idea to implementation. It turned out it was just a little software patch that they had to do. And now anyone who wants to travel around Sweden using the chip implant as a ticket can do so. And this has caught some worldwide attention. So I just explained the process. If you want to see it, you can download the SJ Labs app, and they have a special instruction how it works if you have a chip implant and you want to connect it to the service. Just like it's a very normal thing. I love it. Okay, I'm rounding off, but I want to give a little bit deeper insight about implants. The way I think of them is that if you look at tech history, and being a tech history nerd myself, I love doing these things, is that we see that technologies are invented, new technologies all the time. And sometimes the hardest thing is not to invent a new technology, but it's actually the social dimension, how people use that technology. And that is when the interface becomes so important. And if you look in tech history, there are cases of, for example, computing was around, but it didn't gain mainstream use before people could actually stop having to type very, very specific commands, like in the old DOS system. And someone said, hey, let's make a desktop with a wastebasket that looks like a wastebasket, and you pull stuff into it. And suddenly computing became available to millions of more people. Same goes for the web. The internet existed since the 1970s, but it never took off until we got a meaningful and easy way to interact with it, which was the web browser, right? Does any one of you guys remember what using the internet before we had browsers was like? It was pretty terrible. We had BBSs, right? You needed to know the phone number to every website you wanted to check. and then you had to wait for 20 minutes for that to download, and then all you would get would be a massive system of index folders, and you would have to click your way through in order to find whatever you were looking for. Then someone said, hey, let's make a visual interface to the internet, and kaboom, it took off. And millions of new companies and ideas and projects could start on this platform. Google and Yahoo and others are just a few. And I don't think I have to explain to you what the smartphone meant to mobile internet and the whole app economy, and now the thousands of new companies, ideas, and businesses that are built on that platform once Apple hacked it and made it interesting. Personally, I do think that the chip implant is a very interesting new way for us to interact with this in the sensor economy, because it's such a convenient way to identify ourselves in all instances. It's totally effortless, and it's always there. Now I know that there are some smart people in this room who are already thinking about a critique here. Come on, Hannes. Why should I have a chip implant in my hand, this crazy thing? I have fingerprints, right? I already have wearable identification with me at all times. Well, you're right, but I think there are a couple of fundamental differences between chip implants and biometrics. And let me explain those in just a very quick way. First of all, biology, biometrics, using ourselves as a measure for identification. Biology is messy. It changes. Take our voices, for example. So the voice is different in the morning and in the evening. The voice is different if I have a cold, or if I'm angry, or if I have been running. And what this ultimately means is that it's difficult for the machine to use voice identification because it's not exact enough. And in practice, this means that you have to widen the variability of using voice for identification for it to work. And the flip side of the coin is, of course, that then you get the false positive identification. Statistically, 4 or 5 out of 100 other guys can use their voice to unlock my computer. And that's just the way those systems have to be built working with biometrics. Fingerprints then. Okay, fingerprints are perhaps a bit more exact, although all of us who have tried working with fingerprint for access knows that it takes a number of swipes, and it depends if your hands are cold or warm or wet, or maybe you've heard something or you've taken a swim, and there are many things that also modify fingerprints. But guys, you know what is much more important with fingerprints? It's that you cannot change them. So if you put your fingerprints in a company database, for example, for accessing a building, and that data is leaked in some way or lost, you can never get them back. A lost password, a lost credit card, they can always be replaced and changed. But if your fingerprints and your biometric data is compromised, it's gone forever, and you can never ever use it again. This is why I am super careful with ever applying biometrics in any place where I'm not absolutely forced to. So, chip implants has the advantages of it's not the computers learning to understand biology, which is inherently messy, but it is about having my body speak the language of the machines, because the machines speak perfect NFC. That is what they are built for. So when I hold my hand up to the reader, it communicates and it speaks in the language that the machines are invented to speak, and there are no misunderstandings. And if I want to, I can reprogram the implant. I can, even if I want to, easily take it out, and it's gone forever. So it's not like a tattoo that you would wear, and maybe some of you guys got a tattoo at some point. You were 19 and you went to Cyprus with the guys. But the chip implant is 100% reversible. Yes, it's 10 seconds of pain, but you can take it out and it's gone. And that, for me, has some very, very significant advantages by applying a digital, encryptable, and also reversible technology for wearable identification. So, yes, I'm sure there are some security professionals in the room, so I do want to quickly highlight also the security dimensions of a chip implant. Super briefly, there are 3 main security dimensions related to wearing a chip implant and using it in the sensor economy. The first one, a question I often get, Hannes, can you be tracked? The simple answer is no. The chip doesn't have a battery, it cannot transmit a signal of its own, so it is passive. And it only wakes up when you are within 1 centimeter of a reader with a specific frequency. So that means if I get lost somewhere in the woods, you can't find me because of the implant. Second dimension, hacking. Can the chips be hacked? Simple answer is yeah, and it's quite easy. So you can just sneak up on someone with a smartphone, with an app, and you can read their data, or you can even add something new to their chip. We don't have that level of security yet. So for me, this is just something to be aware of. Don't put your life secrets on your chip implant. Don't put your Swiss bank account, if you happen to have one, on a chip implant. Think of a chip implant and the information you put on the implant as information you would be okay to put on a t-shirt and walk down the street, right? So this is my Instagram, follow me please, or this is where I work. Stuff you're okay to have in public. Third dimension, which I think is perhaps the most interesting from a security point of view, is the cloning. So today what you can do is you can read someone's implant that has a special digital code, okay, and then I work at Epicenter, you can go home and you can program your own new chip, and you can pretend to be me and go into my office. Yeah, that is a scenario. However, it doesn't really differ from the fact that I can already today take the key badge out of your handbag, swipe it, put it back, and go home and make a copy. So this challenge already exists with current access identification systems. And we already have ways to deal with them. For example, multi-factor verification. If you go to an office, off office hours, you also need a PIN code, and etc. We can build layers of security on top of a basic access system. So, chip implants for me right now is a fun technology to play with, but it's a super early adopter exploration level. But what we can see in the near term is further applications of implant tech. Encrypted implants, payment implants, and health monitoring implants. I'm just waiting and working with a number of different projects for the possibility to have this entire functionality of this device implanted under the skin instead. It will give me a much better data capture. It will give me 24/7 access, and it will have a lot less user friction than having to wear this. Maybe I don't want to wear it when I'm doing sports or going to a nice party and I have to have a nice dress. So I could share with you, I don't know how much time I have. I think I'm running out of time, yes. So I'm going to save this for later with sharing with you some crazy examples of people putting weird technology in their bodies. For example, we have been experimenting with a North Sense, which is a device that vibrates when you turn north, so that you always know how to navigate. And there are some fun examples, putting magnets in your fingers to feel magnetic fields, or as this gentleman, Frank, who has hacked his hearing aids so that he can hear Wi-Fi wherever he is. Or Moon Rebas, who has connected an implant in her arm to the global system of seismographic sensors. So whenever there's an earthquake somewhere on planet Earth, she feels it within 2 milliseconds in her arm, connecting herself to a whole planet. But my final message to you guys is this. Yes, it's fun to explore new technologies, but ultimately there are two reasons why we should understand them. Not just for using them for business and innovation, but we must also be aware that all these technologies, chip implants, voice assistants in our home, or why not DNA sequencing yourself, these are all technologies that already exist, and potentially they can be used against us, addressing our privacy or harvesting information about us in ways we don't want. And this is why I also think it's important to be on top of the new technologies that are emerging. Because even if you're not going to apply them personally or professionally, you have to have a certain understanding of the strengths and weaknesses and uses of these new technologies. And this is also a very important thing to think about. But now I've been talking way too long, and being a biohacker, I think talking is just half the thing, and the more fun is in the demonstrations. Which is why now it's time for the implant party, right? So thank you very much for your time.
Jag tycker inte om nålar, så får se hur det här går.